So we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Philip Lynch. I'm the Director of Special Education Services. Dr. Mason, unfortunately, shared that she was not able to make it this evening. She needs to be present at the board meeting, so she will not be able to join us. But she sends her well wishes to everybody. Again, thank you for being here. We are glad in this occasion that we don't have to be in person. It's really ugly weather out there. So this is one time when we were really thankful to be able to come to you in a little different venue. So we're hoping that our numbers will continue to go up in the participation as folks are able to jump in this evening. I'm going to go ahead and allow the co-chairs to introduce themselves, and then I will introduce some members of the MCPS team and some of our presenters this evening. So co-chairs, you want to go ahead and say hello? I see Victoria there. So Victoria, you want to start?
Yes, hi, thank you, Phil. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Victoria Yellow, and I have a kid with special needs at BE. She's in 5th grade. I want to thank all the staff, MCPS staff tonight for the presentation. And I know we have 2 parents who are planning to give testimonies tonight. Thank you for your advocacy, and I will pass to the other co-chairs.
So I should have done this before we got into all of our introductions, but thank you, Victoria. I need to make sure that our folks who need the Spanish interpretation have access to that. So Connie, if you want to introduce yourself or start by maybe sharing with folks how they can access the interpretation by clicking on the globe down below.
Thank you, Phil. Buenas noches, espero de que todos estén bien. Bienvenidos a una nueva reunión de SEAC. Mi nombre es Connie. Quisiera hacerles saber para todas las familias, las personas que necesitan interpretación, de que hay un intérprete en la reunión de hoy día. Tienen que buscar en las opciones en donde dice interpretación, en donde dice lenguaje interpretación en inglés. So language interpretation. Solamente lo hacen los seleccionan y le van a poder escuchar la reunión en español. Cualquier cosita, comuníquense con nosotros en el chat y para que podamos asistirlo. Pero muchas gracias por estar aquí. Good evening, everybody. I was just doing a translation for all the families that English is not their first language. We have interpretation. I'm so happy to be here with you all. I'm Connie. I'm a co-chair. I've been attending SEAC meetings since my kids were little, 3.5 years old. I enjoy every meeting. I feel like I always learn something. I love to advocate for families, and I'm so glad that we have 2 testimonials tonight. So with that said, I don't want to take enough that much time, but Amy, go ahead.
Hey everyone, welcome back to our dedicated returning families and welcome to our new families. My name is Amy Bloom. I am another SEAC co-chair. I have 2 children at Bethesda Elementary School. One receives in 5th grade special education, and I'm happy to be here, happy to be a part of this committee. And I think that's all we have.
Thank you, co-chairs. I'm going to take a minute to recognize folks who are SEAC supporters from central office. And so I introduce Jen Strobel, if you want to wave, Jen, and Mary Rose Catenia, and Amy Kropp. Okay. Amy Kropp is one of my fellow directors, and Jen and Mary Rose are instructional specialists that support us. And I also will introduce our presenters for this evening. We have Malika Brown from the Office of Curriculum and Instructional Programs. We're so thankful to have Malika and that office as our partners in the work. And we have Jackie Hongwadaram, who is one of our instructional specialists in the Department of Special Education Services. So you'll be hearing from them this evening. I know we have other MCPS staff on board here this evening. I'm not going to take time to introduce everybody, but thank you all for being here and supporting us. And thank you all for participants for being here as well. So what I want to first do is start by going through the agenda. But before I do that, I want to share that Jen Strobel has placed in the chat a Google link to a form that will allow folks to provide us with your email address if you would like to be added to our distribution list. Given the topic this evening, we wanted to make sure that anybody who has an elementary student, especially an elementary student with a disability, was aware of our meeting this evening. So we connected to make folks aware, and we do that sometimes. We advertise in different venues, and so we recognize we may have some folks who are here for the first time, and if you would like to be added to our distribution list, we promise we don't abuse it. We try to limit our emails to you. We typically use it only to share the agendas that occur on a monthly basis, and this meeting, as a reminder, if you're new, occurs on the fourth Thursday of every month, and it is one of our primary venues for sharing information with parents and community members about what's going on in the special education community in Montgomery County. All right, so if we want to pull up the agenda there. Okay, so first we're going to hear some public testimony. As our co-chairs shared, we have a number of folks who have provided us with public testimony. There are actually co-chairs 3. I received one shortly before the meeting began. So we're going to go ahead and allow those 3 folks to share their testimony. Before we do that, I'm going to just revisit the guidance or the ground rules around public testimony. So I will share that, and then we'll hear from our parents. And as Amy and Connie and Victoria said, thank you so much for your advocacy and for being willing to share your thoughts and feelings about the topic that you're discussing this evening. One of the primary purposes of this meeting is for us to get feedback from the community. And we're then going to hear from Ms. Brown and from Ms. Hongladarm regarding the topic that came through from the participants and also through our co-chairs. It was a topic that folks have been asking to hear more about for quite a while. So we were glad to be able to put that on the agenda, and that is addressing the needs of struggling readers. I purposely used that the broad title for that discussion because it does include the instruction that happens with our core instruction and our core curriculum, and moves through all the way through the different tiers of supports and services for students with disabilities. And so we're going to hear about that continuum this evening in that presentation. I'll be sharing some brief updates about compensatory recovery services, and then we're going to move into our networking. Our networking session is going to be set up a little different this evening. We have been working with our co-chairs to try to think about different ways to make the meeting a little bit more accessible for parents. When we are presenting, for example, we do have the chat open, and you are welcome to put questions in the chat as we move through the presentation. But we will also be providing an opportunity for you to ask direct questions, come off mic and ask direct questions of the presenters when we do our networking session. We're going to have 3 breakout rooms, and I'll repeat this at the end, but I do want you to know what's available to you so that you can stick around if you're interested. But we're going to have 3 breakout rooms. One will be with our presenters for the Addressing Struggling Readers. If you want to ask more in-depth questions and hear from them, that'll be a breakout room. One will be a breakout room with me, the director, and you're welcome to ask me questions about compensatory services or any other topic. It's a time for you to come into that room and just and speak with me directly if you would like to do that. And then we'll have another breakout room that will be with Amy Bloom, one of our SEAC co-chairs. She's going to be talking about some books and resources of interest. And so you'll have those 3 options after our primary presentations are over. And as I mentioned, we're constantly trying to look for ways to improve this meeting. The co-chairs have been wonderful in sharing the feedback from the community, and we are very open to the feedback, whether it's positive, whether it's constructive, whether it's pushing us to improve. We are very open to it, and so we're always looking for ways to change up the format. We know that this virtual format has been a little bit of a challenge for us. We recognize that when we were in person, there were often times for folks to walk up to the presenters, ask questions. There were opportunities for folks to just walk up to me or to other staff members and share concerns. And we just don't have that opportunity for folks to just walk up and interact with each other at this time, but we hope to get back there and do a hybrid process in the future. But right now, this is where we are. So we're trying to think of ways to create those spaces. And we'll continue to try to improve. The last thing I'll say on that front is that the co-chairs would like to put out a survey that really is about the structure of this meeting and to get more in-depth feedback from you. I would like to send that out prior to our next meeting. So we'll be working with them to come up with what those questions would look like. But it's really would be a survey that would be designed to get some feedback about the structure of this meeting. So be on the lookout for that. And with that said, again, new members, if you'd like to add your name to listserv, go to that Google form in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and I apologize for reading, but I'm going to go ahead and just read the ground rules because it has been a while since we've gone over those, and we do have 3 folks who are going to be providing public comment. The public comment section of SEAC meeting is an opportunity for Montgomery County Public School special education leaders to hear the views of the community members and receive advice from the special education parent community. It is not our practice to respond immediately to the issues that are raised, although I will say that there are times when I am able to respond immediately. If I can, I will. It is not the SEAC will take all comments about the provisions immediately to the, SEAC will take the comments about the provision of special education services into consideration. Special education leadership will review the recommendations with the SEAC co-chairpersons and take action if appropriate. Each meeting has public comments from, we say 7 to 7:15, but we will certainly allow for the public comments that come to us as long as we can make sure that the primary presentation will still fit in. You may sign up for presenting public comment by sending an email to the SEAC co-chairpersons prior to the meeting. No decisions will be made on public comment items during the actual SEAC meeting. Any follow-up information will be handled outside of the meeting through appropriate MCPS members. Public comment participants will have 3 to 4 minutes to speak, and conduct of all speakers and participants will be within the bounds of proper etiquette. So with that said, we'd like to go ahead and co-chairs. I'm not sure if you thought about an order, if you want to introduce folks, but I will turn it over to you. And I will, when we get through the first 2, I will, we can get to our 3rd person and allow him to share. Okay.
Thank you, Phil. I would like to introduce a wonderful parent advocate, Ms. Julie Aker. Thank you for being here with us.
Sorry about that. I'm still trying to get used to my buttons and all. Good evening. My name is Julie Aker, and I answer to any variation of my name. I'm the parent of a medically fragile student with profound and global disabilities. My student has been attending Longview School since kindergarten. Today, I want to celebrate Longview and request that MCPS modify Longview's program. For more than 5 years, Longview has been offering a phenomenal program for its students, complete with meaningful job training, enrichment classes designed specifically with its students in mind, a programmatic research-based approach to building communication skills, and an intensive focus on increasing independence in all areas of academics and critical life skills. Longview has accomplished this under the direction of visionary leadership by drawing on the talents of skilled and dedicated staff, and by offering integrated related services to deliver continuity, consistency, and coverage in therapeutic services. All students have thrived in this educational environment. When education had to be offered virtually, Longview put together a stellar, robust program, including specials and teletherapy sessions from approximately 9:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Virtual delivery of education has drawbacks, but even parents of those students who did not benefit much from it, agree that Longview's efforts have been exemplary in this regard. Now, with return to in-person education, Longview has implemented strict protocols for the safety of staff and students. To my knowledge, there has not been an incidence of transmission between staff and students or among students. I am truly grateful that my student attends Longview School. My concern is that there isn't enough of Longview. Longview follows a traditional school calendar of 180 days with 4-week half-day ESY. Students with profound and global impairments are acutely vulnerable to regression and loss of skills when their education is disrupted. The long stretches of time between school and ESY and back to school inevitably cause loss of ground. Furthermore, our students depend 100% on others to take care of their basic needs like feeding and toileting, and they require tremendous time and effort to get them ready to learn. The half day of school during ESY does not offer much learning time, much less the intensive repetition and practice they need to master any skill. Wouldn't it make sense for these students to have an 11 or 12-month full-day program? I am advocating that Longview students and those like them should have more than the standard 180 days of schooling. They need year-round continuity and stability in the delivery of their education and the services that make them learning ready. MCPS and the schools it contracts with already do this for other students, so why not ours? MCPS funds year-round education in private schools such as Ivy Mount, St. Elizabeth, Frost, Kennedy Krieger, etc., to meet the needs of students with similar profiles. MCPS itself has moved to this model for a few of its own schools. Under the Innovative Schools Initiative, MCPS has created and implemented for at least the 2 last years a year-round schooling model for Roscoe Nix and Arcola elementary schools. In these 2 schools, students start 30 days earlier. Their current academic year began on July 6, 2021, and will continue until June 13, 2022. Here is how MCPS website describes the rationale for the Innovative Schools Initiative. Early start reduces summer learning loss, gives students a jump start on their school year, and provides students with an opportunity to connect with their peers and explore new concepts through project-based learning and social-emotional learning. Many of the staffing, transportation, and other logistical challenges to offering year-round education have already been worked out in the course of creating the Innovative School Initiative. MCPS should be able to expand this initiative to include all special schools. In conclusion, I urge MCPS to include special education schools in the Innovative Schools Initiative and move them to a year-round calendar of education so that the students with the greatest needs, those who are the most vulnerable to disruptions in their education, can have the best chance of retaining their learning and skills. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you so much for your advocacy for that and for also for recognizing the hard work that takes place at Longview. So thank you very much for that testimony. And Connie, you want to turn it over to the next?
Sure thing. Ms. Monica Shepard, I believe she's with us tonight.
Yes, thank you. Good evening to everyone in the SEAC committee. And please excuse me, this is a very deeply personal advocacy effort, so thank you for your time. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening and to represent parents of students with language-based learning disabilities within MCPCS. As a parent of a current MCPS student and a former MCPS student myself, I'm here to share my views on the current elementary education curriculum, namely Benchmark. First, I want to congratulate the elementary education ELA team for taking the first steps over the last year to advance a structured literacy pilot letters professional development series. This is a great initial step to advance the county's elementary educational curriculum towards the science of reading. MCPS's structured literacy pilot and over 30 years of literacy research known as the science of reading directly conflict with Benchmark Advanced 2018 version, which is our district's current ELA curriculum. By taking a structured literacy approach to ELA, you are enriching all of the students of MCPS schools versus the current status quo of only 40% who are at or above grade level in reading. We need to rely on research to guide our curriculum choices. Superintendent Dr. McKnight acknowledges problems with Benchmark Advance in the January 2012-2022 memorandum subject, Curriculum Implementation and Evaluation Update, and states, one challenge with the Benchmark Advanced curriculum is that it includes lessons and texts that lack cultural diversity. Other challenges are a lack of sufficient development of foundational reading skills and technology support and integration. Why, even with this acknowledgement by Dr. McKnight, is MCPS going ahead with Benchmark for the 2022-2023 curriculum? I know personally that if you can't read and write, you're judged. You're judged by teachers throughout your academic career. You're judged by friends and peers. You're judged as part of standardized tests, future employers, professors, basically everyone. Reading and writing are fundamental to ensuring a person can find a good job, buy a house, open a bank account, and all other fundamental things that must be accomplished every day in our society. If you can't do these things, a person faces a lifetime of ridicule, which shapes a person's sense of self. If you care how this affects the hardworking, eager minds of all the students in this county, you will make changes, not tomorrow or next year, but now. I plead with you that tomorrow is too late. For the 60% of students not reading at grade level, it will take them years, if not a lifetime, to ever make up their learning loss. As a former student of MCPS from grades kindergarten to 9th, I was that student who had dyslexia, but who didn't know. I was gifted enough to hide my disabilities at the expense of truly learning to decode and encode. I was one of those students who was unable to live up to my fullest academic potential, who was ridiculed and questioned by professors about my ability to understand what I was learning. One who was thought to be less than because my grammar is horrible. I have lost numerous chances at job opportunities because I struggled to know the difference between the written form of homonyms. My grammar is subpar for my mental capabilities. Though, since I've never gained the proper foundation in decoding and encoding I needed, it is near impossible for me to go without several grammatical mistakes on important documents such as my resumes and cover letters. I've had colleagues tell me to my face as a horrible writer and or I read too slow. I'm not good enough and I could not keep up with the rigor of organizations I was working at. Why are we at the same place we were 25 years ago with our approach to a core curriculum for reading? To me, it's embarrassing and unnecessary for kids in the 21st century, for our kids to face the same challenges I faced. We need to do better and not fall further behind. A core curriculum centered on the science of reading is necessary to ensure children gain the fundamentals of reading. This is a proven approach that works for everyone, not just children with language-based learning needs. The current MCPS piecemeal approach does not work. Core curriculum is educative and time is of the essence. Time is of the essence for MCPS students who were further challenged due to the COVID-19 pandemic. MCPS has agreed to roll out a newer version of Benchmark Advance 2022 in 9 schools, and the rest of the elementary schools will continue with Benchmark Advance 2018. MCPS should cut their losses and procure a knowledge building curriculum that has strong foundational skills and instruction. Continuing continuing on a path that puts return on investment as a higher priority than investing in the education of our children. Benchmark is not that answer, and tomorrow is too late to make the change. Today with my daughter, I can see from her experience that she is being left behind, and not much has changed in the last 30 years when it comes to the advancement of MCPS's curriculum to focus on the people who need you, the leaders of the ELA curriculum in the county, to make the changes in a timely manner. It breaks my heart to see my daughter struggle to read the cumbersome and confusing text within Benchmark. She has an IEP and gets help from a reading specialist, but often the reading specialist has to cover for other classes due to the teacher shortage in the county, thus leaving my daughter and her peers with dyslexia to figure it out and how to do it on their own. My daughter is lucky to have a fabulous teacher who works with students, but not all children are as lucky. And even with such a great teacher, my daughter struggles because the curriculum is not adequate. It is evident we are failing our kids through the subpar curriculum and lack of adequate staff support. Through various assessments, such as the Education Equity Plan, MCPS has issued requests for proposal RFP number 4478.1, pre-vetting for mandatory requirements and ed report evaluation or other comparable external reviews. We know that Benchmark is failing our county. Here are a few ways that it is not sufficient. The guided reading level text use an outdated practice that is inadequate and ineffective. It relies on 3 queuing systems that have children or students guess rather than decode. Research shows students should have more practice in decodable text. There is very weak instruction in foundational skills. The curriculum doesn't offer enough practice in phonetic awareness, phonetics, fluency, vocabulary, and morphology. The curriculum focuses on teaching comprehension strategies rather than immersing students in text in order to develop comprehension. The mentor reads and consumables are low interest text. The writing expectations are not age appropriate. There is very little opportunity for knowledge building. Fluent word reading is key to reading comprehension and should be the primary goal of reading instruction. With Benchmark, it is currently not addressing. There is not enough differentiation. Given our county's racial and ethnic distribution for 2021-2022, with the population split between 22% Black, 14% Asian American, 33% Hispanic, and 26% white, Benchmark does not provide a chance for students to see themselves represented in text or for them to feel like they are learning in a curriculum that highlights the world through an equitable lens. In conclusion, leaving 60% of the current students who are below reading level is not okay. The science of reading is not a new approach. For MCPS to meet its core purpose to prepare all students to thrive in their future, MCPS needs to fully implement a structured literacy curriculum and provide appropriate funding so it can be implemented systemically and sustainably across the county's elementary schools. This will be the best outcome for our students, and time is of the essence for all MCPS students who are further challenged due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you for your time.
Monica, thank you so much for sharing that and for taking the time to put that testimony together. I normally don't do this, but I will say that, and I hope Ms. Brown is okay with this, but I shared this testimony with Ms. Brown in advance of the meeting. That's Malika Brown from our curriculum office, and she sent me a 2-word email back. She said, "Powerful testimony." That was her response to me.
Thank you.
So you're going to hear from those folks and from our folks a little later in the presentation. And as I mentioned in the opening remarks about testimony, we are unable to respond right away. We hope that some of the information shared in the presentation will address some of your testimony. We also have that opportunity for folks to speak directly to the presenters after the presentation. So we have one more presenter. I saw him on the screen. That's Mr. Cummings. So Mr. Cummings, if you would like to go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Lynch. First, I'd like to say thanks, Monica. I mean, you're a hard, tough act to follow. I mean, I'm going to speak to some of the same things of dyslexia. My case is more on tier 3. Also, I recognize some folks, Jackie Hungla-Daram, who's working with coming up with an intervention for my daughter and tweaking it, and it's going really well. So it's good to see you, Jackie, and thanks. And I also recognize Malika Brown from her recent presentation to Decoding Dyslexia, and it was good to see you. So thanks for that. Thank you, Mr. Lynch, for the introduction. My daughter was identified with dyslexia in 1st grade, which, as I understand, is generally quite early for such an identification. She is otherwise notably intelligent, readily qualifying for the twice exceptional GTLD program, and generally receiving high marks. Dyslexia is her primary disability, and she is now in the 5th grade. And in the intervening time, she has received what I think is the best that MCPS has to offer on tier 3 for dyslexia support, the Orton Gillingham program from the Institute for Multisensory Education, IMSE. Although they are looking at avenues to strengthen her mastery, her MCPS reading specialist recently described my daughter as finished with MCPS's IMSE materials. However, she is still significantly behind with spelling and reading scores at the border between 1st and 2nd grade equivalent levels during recent testing. This is 3 years behind, despite receiving about 3 years of the highest level of tier 3 intervention. Her language comprehension scores are remarkably high, but she struggles with phonological awareness and speed of recall, which gives her a double deficit and reading ability that meets the measures for severe dyslexia. It would appear that MCPS is tapped out in interventions for my daughter, and we're curious what additional services might be available now or in the future. Our testing psychologist recommended a certified academic language therapist, or CALT, C-A-L-T, but I was informed MCPS has none on staff. MCPS has contracted reading intervention training from IMSE and others. I'm sure Malika will fill us in. So I reached out and learned that IMSE does indeed have a CALT on their staff, who explained to me that IMSE has 3 levels of training, each with a practicum step. All MCPS reading specialists that I'm aware of trained in IMSE only have the 1st level of training, and none have any practicum experience. The CALT dyslexia specialist at IMSE also informed me that some readers do indeed require a CALT for effective learning progress, and described to me that CALT certification is effectively the 4th level, above the highest level that IMSE can train and certify. With only cursory research, I quickly learned that my daughter's recent failure could have been readily predicted because MCPS is objectively ill-equipped for dyslexia education. I feel like I trusted MCPS to help my daughter going back to 1st grade, and I was let down because now she's in 5th grade. When and how can we expect MCPS to improve their offerings for dyslexia intervention? Will MCPS be hiring any certified academic language therapists? Will the district be advancing the training of any of the reading specialists beyond the lowest levels commercially available? Toward these goals, I might take a moment to point out the recently announced Maryland Leads Grant Program, in which the state of Maryland has offered $150 million of new funding to support growth in education, including specific allocations for the science of reading and staff growth initiatives. I hope that MCPS will seize this opportunity, and I would be happy to support these efforts as a parent advocate.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings, for your testimony, and thank everybody for providing testimony. We went for several months without having anybody present, and I was starting to get a little worried. So I'm glad that folks are leading the way, and I hope they inspire others to feel comfortable to share their thoughts and provide us with advice. And that's really how we see it. So thank you. At this time, what I'd like to do is turn it over, Derek, if you could help us with the presentation to our presenters. I did see that Ms. Laura Hankins was on screen. I did not introduce her earlier, but she is also an instructional specialist with the Office of Curriculum and Instructional Programs. So she will be here this evening with us as well. And she helps to support those initiatives for struggling readers through that office. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Malika and her team and get them started.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. I did not realize that this was just going to be such an emotional meeting. I'm all over the place right now, and I'm holding back tears. Appreciate the testimonies. And I hope that, when we're finished today, that you do see the work that we have done so far and the work that we're going to continue to do, because everything you shared today is spot on and exactly in alignment with what we're trying to do. So I hope that you see that this journey that we're on is reflective of and in response to the way that you feel. So just a quick introduction. This is our team. Again, I'm Malika Brown, the elementary ELA supervisor. I am a solid, 8 months into the position. My 4th year in the curriculum office, but 1st year in the supervisory position. And then that's the ELA team, also brand new. I'll let Laura introduce herself in a moment, but we have Vivian on. They're not here with us, but wanted to kind of give you at least part of their faces so that you can get a sense of the team. Vivian On, another instructional specialist, Jesse Bradbar, and then Colleen Schaefer are 3 of the instructional specialists, and then Laura Hankins is the 4th. And we are all brand new. We are all in the positions for the 1st year. And you'll get a chance to meet Laura in a moment. If we can go to the next slide. So we really wanted to start out with sharing our vision. One of the first things when we came together as a team, it was important for us to really think about what do we want for students, teachers, and leaders in MCPS around when we're thinking literacy. And so we worked really hard to come together to really craft our vision. And so here it is in front of you. And what we want for students is that all of them to be equipped with the literacy skills that they need to be successful, receiving instruction that's really tailored to meet their individual needs. And one of the things, Monica, you spoke about, that opportunity for them to be able to see themselves in text, not just seeing themselves, but seeing themselves in a meaningful way that really promotes that joy and affirmation across all content areas. In order for that to happen, we know that there's things that we need from our teachers. And so we really want every single teacher for them to have the skills and the knowledge to be able to assess, diagnose, and provide targeted instruction where they're really utilizing the pedagogy and that includes research-based best practices, a deep understanding of the content, so those core, Common Core state standards, to ensure that they're helping all learners acquire the critical literacy skills while understanding how implicit bias impacts teaching, evaluating student learning, and ways to disrupt the harmful impact. And we also need to make sure that our leaders have what it takes to be able to coach the teachers and support the teachers with ensuring that they are providing and effectively meeting the needs of their students. And so that was the first thing that we wanted to do to come together as a team. If we can go to the next slide. And in order to meet our vision, we know that we have a part and there's work for us as an ELA team. And so our mission was to really ensure that children, again, every single child is equipped with the literacy skills that they need to be successful in education, not just in elementary school, but also, beyond elementary school, when they leave those elementary years, that they are continuing to be successful. And part of that is by providing our reading specialists, all of our teachers, our administrators with the understanding that they need professional learning related to the importance of equity, acquisition of reading, and the ability to provide skilled and guided instruction while anticipating and supporting school needs. And so that was our work. So knowing what we want in our vision for our students, for our teachers and our leaders, this is the work that we have to do to ensure that we meet that vision. So this is our mission. And so I'm going to talk through some of the things that we, in a short 6 months, some of the things that we have been able to do. And then also we're going to talk through our next steps and where we're headed. We do acknowledge that Montgomery County is a huge system, right? We are supporting 136 elementary schools, and part of our work is really ensuring that we're bringing alignment to what's happening across all 136 elementary schools. It's a challenge, but it's a challenge that, you know, the 5 of us in collaboration with other offices, the work that we do with special ed, work that we do with our accelerated and enriched team, really just to make sure that it's a collective, collaborative, and it's cohesive supports to schools. So if we can go to the next slide. So right now, knowing what the research says, and you know, and Monica shared the science of reading and the research that tells us, the body of research that tells us how children learn how to read. And so we've really dug into that. And so we provided professional learning for administrators on the science of reading. We are currently scheduling our 2nd and 3rd cohort for administrators because it's not just important for, you know, we know, yes, we need the learning and we know the importance of having teachers to engage in that learning, but administrators also need to have that knowledge base too, so that they can support their teachers. And so we're offering the 2nd 2 cohorts, and we're going to continue to add cohorts to make sure that our administrators have the learning that they need in order to monitor and support the work of the science of reading. And once we completely shift to structured literacy. We're also doing the same thing with our reading specialists. Our reading specialists, all of them, minus a couple, are also engaging in LETRS training. So LETRS stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling, because we know the importance of their roles in schools and that they are working and supporting teachers who are then in turn working and supporting students. And so we have, they are currently engaging in LETRS. It's 2 volumes, 8 units, all rooted in the science of reading. And so that's the work that they're currently engaging in as we make the shift to structured literacy. We're also working on de-emphasizing this guided reading. We know that guided reading works, you know, for a small subset of students. And we also acknowledge here in MCPS that guided reading has been the small group instructional approach, right? That's what we have, the learning that we've provided over the years, that, you know, that guided reading, every student, every day. But we now know that that's not the case, right? That guided reading isn't an instructional approach to support students and helping them become skilled readers. And so we've been working with our reading specialists to really remove that emphasis that we have placed on guided reading for so long. I said to administrators today that we are breaking up with guided reading because we know that it's not effective for all students. But we know that it's going to be a challenge for teachers because that's something, again, that they have really been doing for a very long time. And so there is going to be some work around, if not guided reading, then what? And so we've also been working with them on increasing the emphasis on foundational skills and how do I really support students with foundational skills, and what does that instruction look like? We've also been working with our reading specialists. And I want to frame it because part of our current work, and I keep saying reading specialists because that's, you know, being new in the position, that's what the majority of the work has been, really preparing and providing our reading specialists with the knowledge base that they'll need to be able to move and support their teachers. So the bulk of the work has been with them and that group, because we believe if they have the solid knowledge and the solid foundation that they need, they'll then be able to, in turn, support their teachers. And so that's been our process. And we've called it this environment of inquiry, where we develop the reading specialists, and then we, in collaboration, we then will support the development of the teachers. Part of the work that we've also been doing is that continued focus on complex text and that content. Really emphasizing the needs, not just in our primary grades, but really in K-5, around the importance of ensuring that students are engaging in reading louds, which they're really having those opportunities to engage in that rich, meaningful text. Another thing that we've put in place, and you know, we acknowledge the challenges that our benchmark curriculum, again, the lack of diversity, the lack of foundational skills in the curriculum. So we are in an evaluation of benchmark. Full disclosure, we have a 3-year contract with benchmark. For about a third of our schools, this is their third and final year under the contract, but for the remaining 2/3 of our school, they still have another year with benchmark after this school year. And so therein lies, part of what we're facing. And so that's one of the challenges is not necessarily being able to make a move right away because, we are still under contract for another year. And I'll talk about what that means and what those next steps are and what are some things that we're looking to do to put in place in just a moment. And then the other part of our work is around the structured literacy pilot. And Laura's going to dig deep into what that work looks like. But that's something that we're doing across 9 schools right now. It was something that was put in place before we came into the position, and part of that work, and that was before Laura came into this position as well. And that was some of the work that she was able to spearhead and get started. So I'll let her jump in and talk through the work that we're doing with the pilot.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Hankins, and I am the instructional specialist, and my title does include reading intervention and dyslexia. And this might be a leap, but I believe one of the reasons I was chosen for this position was because I was a reading specialist at an elementary school that was leading the school through the transition to structured literacy. And it's where the structured literacy pilot kind of got formed out of, and it's really super exciting. So when I joined the team in August, I was put in charge of the pilot, which, like Malika mentioned, was kind of identified and kind of explained in June, but then was really, come pre-service was time to hit the ground and run. So, so the last spring, the 9 schools were identified to pilot a structured literacy approach in K-2. And this is, was written as a 3-year pilot that's begun with specific components of structured literacy. There's a lot that goes into structured literacy, and I just have to give kudos to Monica for explaining it so well. So there were instructional components that were added to these K-2 programs, and also things deleted from our previous balanced literacy approach, like was mentioning, like guided reading. And included a lot of PD for these schools that led to big shifts that these schools made this year. The plan going forward is to continue to build the capacity of these schools and the teachers in these schools to achieve a comprehensive structured literacy approach to teaching and learning. But this year, we put just a few things in place, critical pieces in place. The structured literacy pilot's focus, like I said, is on K-2. That's what it was funded for. So 2 major additions and 1 significant shift that these schools made this year is that they all receive daily, explicit, systematic instruction in learning the code of text through phonics and phonemic awareness instruction. Some of the schools are using IMSE's OG in Tier 1 as first instruction, and others are using really great reading, which is Countdown, Blast, and HD Word. These schools are using DIBELS as well, and the dynamic indicators of basic early literacy skills, 8th edition. They're using that as their assessment tool, in addition to MapRF, which they're still giving because that's still our county's county assessment, but they have added DIBELS to their program. This is not to be confused with benchmark curriculum. I mean, benchmark DIBELS assessments are given 3 times a year, and progress monitoring is used for students not yet meeting benchmark every 2 to 4 weeks. And schools are using this data, and Amplify provides this dynamic platform to not only monitor progress, but also identify the specific areas of need, instructional areas of need, and then addressing those needs in either whole group or small group instruction throughout the day. DIBELS also provides additional lessons that directly address the area of skill deficit identified in the progress monitoring. So that was a new, very big piece for these schools to take on this year. One of the other biggest shifts is that they are using decodable texts instead of leveled text in the in K-2 for students who are not yet fluent. For students who are fluent, they're in uncontrolled text. But for students who are not yet fluent, they're in decodable text. This text is designed to offer practice to students so that they can practice the phonics skills they've learned the most recently and layered with skills that they've learned previously to then foster fluency and automatic word recognition. Again, aligned with the science of reading research as to how all people learn to read. Leveled text used in balanced literacy programs, I think this group probably knows that it's not supportive of early readers and actually can promote poor reading behaviors that develop into habits that need to be broken later. So these pilot schools have received professional development in the science of reading, the components of structured literacy, and strategies for effective implementation. This is the work that I've been doing with them. They have also had training from the instructional programs themselves that they've been implementing. Many of the teachers have taken the letters training, and but truly finding PD time right now, all schools can attest to, is really, really tough. One school managed to find the time and engaged in a 3-part series on dyslexia this year. And all the pilot schools, and hopefully all schools, will receive that same kind of training as staff meeting time allows. But getting PD time, again, is face-to-face time with teachers right now is tough. We're trying. All students in the pilot schools are engaged also in complex text through read alouds, through shared reading in K-2. Those of you familiar with, oh, we didn't advance the slide. I keep talking in the slide. Can we advance the slide? So sorry. I realized I didn't see the rope on the slide. Those of you familiar with Scarborough's rope, which is the model of reading that illustrates the codependent nature of word recognition skills and oral language skills, know that developing that oral language of students while learning the code is essential. Students hear and learn to understand complex language, written language, to understand more, and they understand that and they get that through read alouds. They're not yet reading at that level, but they're learning the oral language vocabulary and complex text structure through read alouds and shared reading, vocabulary and content, and apply that learning through discourse. The schools are using Benchmark Advance for these components. That's what we have available to us right now, and that's what they are using. MCPS is conducting an evaluation of the pilot. Staff are going to be engaging in our first set of surveys this month to collect testimonial data from reading specialists, teachers, and administration on the efficacy of the program and possible upgrades. Anecdotal data collected from the reading specialists and a sampling of teachers that I've just had the pleasure to speak to is that they love the approach, they are inspired by the learning, and it is working for students. So that's exciting. So I'll pass it back to Malika.
You know, what Laura was speaking to around the work in the structured literacy school, the 9 schools that are currently piloting this. And all of what she said, we've been using that information, working very closely with the 9 schools, because this is the direction that we're moving to for all schools. So if we can go now, we can go to the next slide. And so looking ahead, a couple of things we're putting in place. So we are shifting from balanced literacy to structured literacy. So again, those 9 schools are really supporting us and helping us to figure out, okay, well, what does this work look like? What are the challenges? What are the strengths? What's the guidance and expectations that we are going to need to put in place so that when we shift from balanced literacy to structured literacy for all schools. This summer, all of our teachers are going to engage in professional learning around science of literacy. Science of reading, so that they have an understanding what it is, why it's important, and also looking at data that continues to support the rationale of why this shift is so important. In addition to that, we're going to continue with the learning for our administrators, also ensuring that they have an understanding of the science of reading and structured literacy as well. So again, that they can continue to support their teachers in this implementation and in this shift. One of the things as well is because we still have another year of benchmark under contract, they do have a 2022 version. And the 2022 version they've shared is aligned with the science of reading. And we want to be able to see that. And so that is part of the reason why we are piloting the 2022 version in about 9 or 10 schools, because we really want to have the opportunity to make sure, okay, is their new curriculum? Is it fully aligned? Are the materials culturally responsive? And do they have a foundational skills phonics component that the teachers will be able to use that provide students with the skills and knowledge that they need around foundational skills? In addition to that, and I'll let Laura jump in a moment, one of the things that we're also doing is, because we know that, yes, piloting the new benchmark in 9 schools will be helpful. Well, what does that mean for all of the other schools? So in K-2, we are considering a foundational skills phonics programs to support those early literacy. And so that will be across all schools. That will replace the current, because we know that the current benchmark, the phonics component, isn't enough, and it isn't giving students what they need, and it doesn't provide that explicit and systematic instruction around phonics. And so one of the things that we're doing is considering a program that can replace that tier 1 instruction for students. And so that all students in K-2 will have explicit foundational skills instruction. And then I'll let Laura jump in and talk about the dyslexia PD as well as DIBELS.
Yeah, I definitely want to mention, so I am very passionate about the dyslexia community of students and parents. And so very honored to have this position. I know we can make changes to serve this special population of students better, but until tier 1 instruction and foundational skills is in place, instruction that reflects the research, right, and is best for all students, until that's in place, early identification, early intervention can't really be effective. So shifting from balanced literacy to structured literacy, it's also not a simple thing, especially in a large district. For those of us who know, I know the feeling of urgency is overwhelming. And for those of us who are students or parents of students with dyslexia, for sure, it's just critical. But we do need to remember that it's the teachers that are the ones that are truly doing the work and the shift. And it's not as easy as flicking a switch. It requires extensive professional development and teacher knowledge of the science of reading and science of reading aligned curriculum and materials and assessment, all paired with leadership that supports the structures that make that success achievable. So I know we can do it, and we're gonna do it, but this does take time and investment in teachers, classrooms, families, and students. And in regard to dyslexia, I know that students with dyslexia are often misunderstood in schools. Raising awareness about dyslexia for all educators is a critical piece of professional development that all teachers need K-12. If nothing else, and of course there's more, but to prevent the unintended impact that ignorance about the brain difference is currently having on students with dyslexia in the classroom. That's what Monica spoke about tonight. The reading specialists have already heard from Jan Hasbrook this year, explaining dyslexia, dispelling myths about it, and the structures that are essential for schools to put in place to better serve them. The reading specialists want more. And we're going to continue to offer professional development to reading specialists and to teachers about dyslexia. It's a personal passion of mine to do this work, and it's a passion of the whole team, and I think of all of us, right? So that is definitely part of the looking ahead and moving forward.
So at this point, we built in this quick break because we wanted to see what questions folks had in the chat. And again, we will have the opportunity at the end of the presentations to have folks jump into a breakout room who have been holding on to questions. Malika and Laura, I'm going to read a couple of questions from the chat. If we can just respond to a few now before we move forward. One comment is it would be awesome for those who are trained in sound and syllables if they could provide services through the CARES tutoring or by strategically scheduling students in very small groups.
So my understanding is Sounds and Syllables is a fantastic program, and it's something that ASDEC does. It's not a training that MCPS has yet provided to any employees. I do know that there are some, there are a few, but there are a couple people, and I know a couple, but there might be more, I don't know, that have gone through that training, but that's something that those teachers have taken upon themselves and done on their own.
And that, I think, I mean, that's something that we can work with our CARES coordinator, our tutoring coordinator, to see, you know, what that would look like in as part of getting them professional learning to be able to support students in tutoring with that. We'd have to look into that, but we can definitely do it.
It's extensive, the training. It's really extensive. It's a lot of hours. It's wonderful. But
Laura, this is Zoe Core. I'm an MCPS high school reading teacher, and I went through this training through some grants. And so my question is just have the training. It's not under, you know, Sounds and Syllables materials are not priced. I'm happy to provide these services. So I just need, like, how do I get the green light? How do I get, the materials are not expensive. So I just want to put it out there. There's a few others of us who've gone through it. And I want to shout out to Blake and the administration at Blake, because they've supported me in bringing some of this into my classroom, where I saw other things that were too high level, even for a 10th and 11th grader, and we needed to go back. So I just wonder how we can use some outside training we got to benefit our students, particularly our students who will not have access to, you know, a private academic language therapist. So
thank you, Ms. Kaur. Yeah, and I appreciate your comments. I don't want this to turn into a dialogue in the middle of the presentation. So if you want to jump into the breakout room and share more information about that later on, that's really why we set that up. So, but thank you so much. I lost my questions here. Let me pull them back up. I know there was I'm stalling a little bit here. I know there was a question about testimony, and I will touch on that at the end in terms of folks sharing information about testimony.
Phil, there was a question that was repeated several times about the list of the 9 schools. I think
that's where I was going, Jen. Thank you. Yes, folks were asking about how they know, and maybe I can combine this. So how they know, how would they know if their school is one of the pilot schools? And then another person asked, how will you know if this work that MCPS is taking on is impacting your student or going to impact your student?
So I can start with the list of schools, and Laura, please jump in where I forget. So the 9 elementary schools, Laytonsville Elementary, Wheaton Woods Elementary, New Hampshire Estates, Dufief, Fox Chapel, Wingate.
You got it. I put them in the chat.
Okay.
But you helped me remember which Chapel. I was trying to think of Stacy's school, and I was
these are oh, I'm Flower Hill. So these are the 9 schools that are currently piloting the structured literacy instructional approach. One of the things that you can see if your child is in one of these schools, in K-2, the impact, I mean, there's always the opportunity to ask your school, what does your student data looks like? They are taking Dibbles, and Dibbles it has a wonderful parent report, and it's a great source of data to be able to see growth and progress. As far as if a student is not in one of the schools, well, again, that's the shift that we're making. I mean, you can still always continue to talk to your child's teacher and ask, how are they supporting, and what does that instructional program look like currently for your student? Laura, do you want to?
Well, yeah, and like, I mean, again, it goes back to the thing that I said about urgency. I feel it so much. I mean, we need to make this shift yesterday, but it does take some pieces to be in place and it takes some money. And so the fact that we were able, whoever, you know, I was still school-based when the pilot was born last spring, and it was funded for K-2. Okay, so that's what we're working on, and that's where we're starting. But structured literacy needs to be in place for pre-K-5 and probably beyond that. But the work, this is where we started the work. So we're really leaning on these schools to teach us how to, how to roll this out successfully for another 130 schools next year all at once. I was able to give all my attention to 9 schools this year. We've got a lot more to roll out next year. So we want to do it in manageable pieces so that it is successful, teachers buy in, and change is accepted.
So we're going to jump back to the presentation. There are a couple of questions that I hope can be addressed in the breakout. One question I think you're seeing there, Malika and Laura, is really, parents asking how they can, help work with their students at home. And then there's a question I know is pretty broad, but and maybe be addressed in the breakout, really about the difference between balanced literacy and structured literacy approaches. So I know that that's can be a mouthful. So we'll reserve those for the breakout. And so Derek, if you could pull the presentation back up, and then we'll move forward, and we'll hear from Ms. Holm-Ladarm, who's going to be moving from our Tier 1 core instruction to discussion regarding how we support students that have been identified with disabilities and resistant to those interventions. And what does MCPS offer? So Derek, if you have that pulled back up, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Hi, everyone. My name is Jackie Holm-Ladarm, as Mr. Lynch said, and most people in the county know me as Mrs. H. So if you ever have to call the office and don't remember my full name, just ask for Mrs. H and they know how to get a hold of me. I do want to acknowledge, I really want to acknowledge the work that Malika and her team are doing around structured literacy and the science of reading. Since this new team has come together, I have truly amazed at the work and the progress that they have made in really educating our administrators, starting with our administrators and our reading specialists around the science of reading and the significance that the components of structured literacy have in meeting the reading needs and the reading acquisition skills of all of our students. And that work and that foundational layer that is, that they are moving forward is really going to have a positive impact on the work that we do out of the Department of Special Education, especially with our students that have more complex reading needs. And so it's really been a privilege to work with this team, to collaborate with this team, and to really see where we are moving as a system towards, reading instruction that is aligned with the science of reading. So I just wanted to, kind of throw those kudos out there, because the work has really been, it's been hard, it's been, but so well worth it. So I just want to acknowledge the curriculum team for that. And so moving forward, as we look at foundational reading skills instruction, as part of that core instruction that our students receive, and as part of that targeted, like what we would call Tier 2 support, we do still have students who have decoding needs that are more complex, that might need something more intensive than what the core curriculum and what some targeted small group support might provide. And that's really, and for our students who have, IEPs, really the role of our office, the Office of Special Education, is to really ensure that all of our schools have the materials and the professional learning that is required to offer that continuum of interventions, those Tier 3 intensive interventions to our students. And so our office continues to provide professional learning and materials And we have a list of some of those interventions that are on the screen. We continue to train and provide support for Orton Gillingham for really great reading. So there are 3 interventions that fall under that umbrella of really great reading. We have Countdown, we have Blast, and we have HD Word. Both of those, the methodologies in really great reading are aligned to structured literacy and based on the science of reading. We have iReady Reading, which we are using as our intensive tier 3 comprehension intervention. And then we also are using Read Naturally Live to address fluency. And yes, and the interventions that I am presenting and talking about here are for all of our students who need intensive tier 3 intervention. So while I work out of the Department of Special Education, the training that we provide is for our special educators, our general educators, our ESOL teachers, our reading specialists, even staff development teachers. It's any of the school staff that are going to be providing that tier 3 intensive intervention to our students. If someone could shift to the next slide. So similar to how Laura and Malika presented, I'm going to talk about kind of the current work that we've been doing in the Department of Special Education and then kind of where we're headed. And so as I shared a moment ago, that collaboration with the ELA team around that system-wide literacy plan continues to evolve. You know, I'm fortunate enough that I get to collaborate along with some of my colleagues with this team to really look at not just about tier 3 intensive intervention, but how are we building that solid foundation for all of our students so that hopefully we may not have to have students in some of those intensive tier 3 interventions. So, you know, our office continues to collaborate with that team on that system-wide plan. One of the other things that we do in our current work out of the Department of Special Education is to provide intervention coaching with individual school staff members. So if I'm out at a school, I'm looking to ensure that teachers are maintaining the fidelity of implementation of the interventions. I might go out, you know, for me, if I go out to a school, I might be providing coaching to a general educator or a special educator or a reading specialist around the implementation of the OG methodologies or really great reading, and looking to see that, you know, how are students responding? I might observe during an actual intervention group and look to see, are students responding to the intervention? Is the teacher implementing the methodologies with fidelity? Are they teaching to mastery? You know, I might offer suggestions around, wow, I think this kid might need some additional multisensory strategies as part of that implementation. So that individual intervention coaching with teachers around those tier 3 interventions. The other thing that myself and some of my colleagues do is that we meet with school teams to look at their data analysis. You know, if they're struggling with trying to determine, you know, is this a kid who needs an intensive tier 3 intervention? And if they do, what intervention would we want to consider? What methodologies might be best appropriate for this child based on their learning needs, their learning profile? You know, we'll dig into the psychological, we'll look to see, what does the assessment data tell us? And maybe what doesn't it tell us? You know, this might be a time where I might recommend, you know, really drilling down and really looking at phonological awareness, you know, making sure that the team has all of the data that they need to make an informed decision and align instruction and intervention to the specific needs of a student. So that continues to be ongoing out of our office. We also do, oftentimes we might, you know, get a request from a school to look at curriculum planning. And so not only do we look at the interventions, but we look at how do we make the curriculum accessible and meaningful and engaging for our students who do have those significant reading deficits. So while we're trying to build their decoding skills, how do we provide them access to that grade level text and provide those opportunities to engage with that text, to respond to text, to have discourse with students around the text that they're reading in the core content, in the core curriculum. So there are times where, you know, we might go out and actually do planning sessions with the school team members and look to see, you know, what technology might be best to use with the student to help build their independence when they're working with the curriculum. You know, making sure that the accommodations and supplementary aids are built into the instruction so that students can meaningfully participate in the curriculum. And then the last thing, which is a big part of my job, are doing academic consults. So there are times where schools, you know, have been trying different things. They've been making modifications to the curriculum. They've been implementing various technology tools for students. They've been implementing interventions, and they're like, we're not sure the student is, you know, is making the progress we would like them to see or we thought they would be making. And so this is where an academic consult would come in. You know, part of the things that I do as part of a consult is that, you know, I typically will do a student observation. I review the student file, the IEP, any, you know, previous assessments that were conducted. I meet with the school team. Sometimes I might come out and work with the student to kind of get a feel for where the breakdown might be occurring, and help to make recommendations for the team in terms of next steps. So that is something that I do frequently with school teams. So that's really the work that that our office has been doing, the current work. And then where we're looking ahead, you know, a lot of this aligns to the work that we're currently doing, but continuing that collaboration with the literacy team on those professional learning opportunities for school staff members. So like this summer when teachers are going to be, you know, getting trained in the science of reading, you know, the curriculum team is great. And asking me to kind of, in my team members, to give our perspective and look at the professional learning and look at the planning through the lens of special education, and what are those considerations we need to make for our students with disabilities as part of their professional learning. Also supporting that shift of structured literacy for that tier 1 instruction. Again, the curriculum office, you know, we work closely together around supporting that shift and ensuring that our administrators, our teachers, our reading specialists, our special educators, even our paraeducators who, you know, provide additional support to our students, having that, you know, comprehensive understanding around structured literacy and the important components of what that looks like in school. Malika and Laura talked about using DIBELS in K-2 next year for benchmarking and progress monitoring for our students. We're also looking to use the assessment for our struggling readers in grades 3 to 5, because we know that we have students beyond 2nd grade who are still struggling and have some complex needs. So looking to see how we can assess those students to ensure that we have appropriate data to make informed decisions around intervention, and then progress monitoring. We will continue as an office to provide training and materials for those tier 3 interventions. We will continue to provide that direct in the moment intervention coaching with individual teachers, whether they're gen ed, special ed, ESOL, reading specialists, whoever may be implementing those interventions with students, as well as conducting those data reviews with school members to really help them make those informed decisions. What does the data tell us? Do we need to do more assessment? And where do we go next? And then of course, those academic consult requests will continue looking, you know, moving forward. Yeah, and actually I'm noticing in the chat, I support elementary schools. My colleague Genevieve Goodman is my counterpart who supports 6 through 12. And I believe she may be coming to a future meeting to talk about the literacy plan at the secondary level and the training that we're doing with our secondary teachers, middle and high school, to address not only reading instruction as part of curriculum, but also as intensive intervention.
So thank you, Jackie. You started to answer some of the questions in the chat, and there were some of them, like you said, that were logistical or about our structure. We decided, and actually we had a little bit of debate about whether we should get into secondary world this evening. We felt like it was going to be a little bit too much to bite off, but we had our elementary folks from the Office of Curriculum and Instruction. So we paralleled that by having Jackie, who supports our elementary tier 3 reading interventions through the Office of Special Education, collaborate with them on the presentation. We can certainly spend some time at a future meeting to focus more on secondary and parallel that with our partners in the secondary curriculum office or secondary curriculum. So we can certainly look at that in the future, but we do have a partner in our office, Genevieve Goodman. Their email addresses can be found in our directory online, and I put the phone number for our office in the chat if folks would like to contact our office to schedule a time to speak with them. They're out at schools quite often or supporting IEP meetings, so they're very busy folks, but they would love to carve out some time to chat with you if you have some questions. So at this point, we're going to move to our next slide, and I'm going to talk a little about compensatory recovery services. So I'm going to give some general updates for you. I will say that we submitted our data to the state, to the Maryland State Department of Education for our first quarter on December 15th, and that data we actually shared in one of our Board of Education Special Populations meetings. I will say I did not get into an update on the data regarding the numbers of students for whom we've had eligibility discussions on this slide tonight, in part because we're in the middle of 2 different data pools for determining how many students have been considered eligible, how many students we've had those conversations. And so that data will be pulled and submitted to the state on March 15th. So we will share some additional data regarding where we are in the process of considering compensatory recovery services for all of our 20,000 plus students in Montgomery County Public Schools at that later date. I will say that at the December mark, we had had those conversations with roughly 37% of our students. And those conversations for compensatory recovery services were held primarily in the spring of last year when we first initiated the effort by providing training to our teachers on how to analyze the data regarding where students were currently performing and any potential impact on the shift to virtual learning for students with disabilities to determine whether students may be eligible for compensatory recovery services. And so we also then took a bit of a pause at the beginning of this year because I know it's hard to forget, but our efforts were really around supporting schools and teachers with getting back into buildings. So that was really one of our primary focuses for our first quarter, but also we took on an effort to retrain our teachers, or to train new teachers on how to analyze data regarding how students were performing and any potential impacts that may need to be addressed through compensatory services. So we will share an update on those numbers in a future meeting. But at that time, like I said, around 37% of students, I believe it was 36.5% of our students had that eligibility discussion with families. And we were continuing to move forward with those conversations throughout the course of the winter. Our expectation is that those discussions will be all completed or held with families by March 31st. And I know that schools are working feverishly as we speak. If you are a parent of a student who has not yet had that discussion, I would encourage you to first start with your student's case manager and the school and ask the question, or make it clear to them, hey, we have yet to have had this discussion regarding whether our student is eligible for compensatory services based on the period of time when students were in virtual learning. And if they are unable to respond, or you're having a difficult time getting the information you need for them, our office, again, is always available to you. And Jonathan Langston is our specialist who is supporting the effort around compensatory recovery services. And I put his direct phone number there in the slide so that you could have that information. Jonathan and his partners are working really hard to make sure that we are delivering these services when students are considered eligible. We have 85 active central office providers. Those are, when I say central office providers, those are staff members who could be school-based teachers who are working after hours or on weekends to provide compensatory recovery services. Those are folks that are providing evidence and research-based interventions to students to support them with any loss of learning due to the shift to virtual learning that was discussed during those eligibility meetings. So we have 85 folks who are doing that. Some of those teachers are not centrally based. Some of those staff members are not a part of that 85, who are teachers who work directly with students in the school setting, for whom they had the discussion, and they are providing the service to their own students after hours or to students in their buildings. We refer to that as a school managed compensatory recovery services. So those services are ongoing. Those are students who are getting compensatory services from a staff member at their local school after school hours. In addition, we also have opened 4 regional compensatory recovery service sites. They are at the locations there below: Little Bennett, Julius West, Rock Terrace, and Eastern Middle Schools. You will notice that they are spanning the county from the north to the south. And we have 216 students that either have received or are currently receiving services. And when I say currently receiving, meaning that they may be coming back to receive those services at those sites over multiple sessions. And those services are currently provided at the regional sites on the weekends. There's a nice picture up here in the corner of one of our sites at Little Bennett. And those students are waiting to work with their teacher and get into the classroom at one of our centers. So that's a general update. We'll have some more detailed information for you in terms of our next data pool when we have that information for March 15th. I want to say a word about a survey that has gone out to many of our stakeholders. If you haven't seen the survey, it will be available to you through this presentation, which we will post. And this is a survey that is really getting feedback for the Maryland State Department of Education on the blueprint for Maryland's future, which is a funding source for education that has gone through the legislative process. And we are currently in the process of engaging with MSDE and with our liaisons to look at how that funding will come to us as a system, what will be, how it will be allocated to support students with disabilities, and what those initiatives will look like. And so the feedback on this survey will help to drive some of those conversations. So we ask folks to participate in that survey, and we've sent it out in several different ways. But if you haven't seen it, we'll make it available to you. I wanted to address the question about access to the public comment before we move into our breakouts. Somebody asked whether they could have a copy of that. And my response is that, different folks who give public comment have different and varying levels of a degree of comfort around, sharing their personal information. And so what I would say to you, and I hope my co-chairs are okay with this, is that if you would like to have access to one of the folks who shared public comment this evening, if you could contact one of the co-chairs and ask them if they would connect with the folks who provided the public comment. And our process is, as I mentioned earlier, that when you want to provide comment, to go through the co-chairs, they will have those folks' information, and then they can speak directly to the person who provided the public comment and get that to you, or they can send it to you if the person is comfortable with that. But I'm not in a position to give out people's personal email addresses or contact information without that process. So I would go through the co-chairs, and they can connect with the folks giving public comment. The time has come for us to shift to our breakout rooms. So you should have the ability to select your own breakout rooms. And Derek, I'm not sure if you want to say a few words. There they are. Okay. So I see that folks are unassigned. So Derek, are there options for them to select a breakout room?
Yes, if you look at the bottom of the list there, it indicates 3 different rooms: struggling readers, meeting with the director, which is Phil, and then SEAC co-chairs. So feel free to select the blue join button to choose which room you'd like to enter.
Thank you, Derek. I didn't see that all the way at the bottom. So you need to just scroll to the bottom. The top has all the participants, and we will see you in those rooms. And if I don't see you within the next half hour or so, thank you all so much for being here. We will be ending all of these sessions at 9. So we have 30 minutes in those breakout sessions. So thank you again for being here. I think we had a total of 112 folks at our peak, and so that's terrific. And thank you to our presenters. Being here, it looks like we retained, which is pretty amazing, 50% of our group through the breakouts, and so that means you all are so committed. Malika, your team, Laura, Jackie, thank you so much for presenting. Parents who provided testimony, thank you so much. I think we heard somebody say that the dialogue was helpful. I will work with the co-chairs. I'm meeting with them on a regular basis about the meetings. We'll put the survey together about our format to get input that way. But thank you all again for everything this evening, and you'll be hearing from us. But I hope this format was helpful, and we look to get your feedback in the future. Okay? Have a great evening, everybody.